Before I formally open the program, I'll present a video about our theme for Day of Remembrance, Reparative Justice, Together We Rise, featuring the redress hearings of 1980, the signing of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, and the current struggle to protect your stock, the sacred lands of the Amah Mutsun tribal band, which you will hear more about later in the program. I will be the MC for this program. We're gathered here in San Jose, Japantown, and we acknowledge that it stands on unceded Muwekma Ohlone lands. On behalf of Nihonmachi Outreach Committee, welcome to the 43rd Annual Day of Remembrance and our first in-person program in 3 years. Rinban Sakamoto of San Jose Buddhist Church Betsuin will formally open our program with the Aspiration.
We have held these gatherings many times before. Gatherings that voice concern about injustices, gatherings that protest long-held grievances, gatherings not only in the past 50 years, but in 100 years past, perhaps even 1,000 years, when people have gathered as we do today. It may seem as though nothing has changed. We continue to face gender inequalities, racial prejudice, human trafficking, corruption, and a great panoply of human-generated concerns. But we should not despair. Rather, recognize that in the simple act of people coming together, we share, strengthen, and broaden the relationship of our community. By being here, we change the way we see each other, change the way we interact, give us opportunities to learn, to strengthen our sense of community, and most of all, our shared humanity. In gratitude, we simply say, Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, Rinban Sakamoto. The Day of Remembrance commemorates the signing of Executive Order 9066 by President Franklin Roosevelt on February 19, 1942, which led to the incarceration of over 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry into concentration camps throughout the United States. Today marks the 81st anniversary of the signing of Executive Order 9066. It seems like a long time ago, but has never been overturned and could be used again. When the Japanese Americans were forced from their homes and put into detention camps, it was a clear violation of their constitutional rights. No one from the community was ever charged with an act of espionage or treason, according to a government report issued during World War II. This report was suppressed had not entered into evidence by the U.S. government, by the U.S. government lawyers in the case of Korematsu versus United States, and came to light decades later. In 1943, very few people knew of the executive order that had forced 120,000 Japanese Americans into concentration camps. Today, we do not have the luxury of claiming ignorance. We cannot allow this to happen again to any other visible, easily profiled minority group. This evening's theme is reparative justice. Together we rise. Reparative justice focuses on the people who have been harmed or injured, repairing damage caused by that harm, and seeking to prevent similar or continuing harm. Reparative justice is in renaming of schools such as Peter Burnett Middle School to Ohlone Middle School. It prevents the harm from continuing to future generations. As you've seen in the video a few minutes ago, reparative justice for Japanese Americans means that they were heard by the U.S. government at the commission hearings on wartime relocation in 1980. It means organizing and campaigning for redress and reparations and seeing the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 finally being signed into law. Reparative justice has still not been fulfilled for Japanese Latin Americans, nor has the promise that forced relocation and imprisonment will never happen again. In the same video, you have seen the struggles of the Amah Mutsun tribal band to protect Yurstock, its most sacred lands, from desecration, from being mined for sand and gravel. They have not had access to these lands for 200 years. Mr. Valentin Lopez, chairperson of the Amah Mutsun tribal band, had an unexpected event this week and had to change his plans to be here tonight. In his place, we are honored to have Professor Veronica Martinez, a member of the Amah Mutsun tribal band, Land Trust Board of Directors, to talk about their struggle for reparative justice. Tonight, we come together to renew our commitment to equality and justice for all people. Our remembrance speaker is Sumi Tanabe, who has been active in the Buddhist Church for 50 years and the first woman president of the San Jose Buddhist Church, Betsuin. Please welcome Sumi Tanabe.
I was a prisoner of war of my own country at age 4.5 during World War II. It has been 80 years since that time, but it's still vivid in my memory, in my mind, and in my heart. My life began on October 12, 1937, in a hospital in Long Beach, California. My father rushed my mother to the hospital because I was coming. It was a hard birth, but when I was finally came into this world, the nurse told my mother and the other staff, hospital aides, another Jack is born. So what could have been a happy occasion for my mother was really the opposite. Racism against Japanese Americans was rampant in those days. My father was born in Hiroshima, Japan, the eldest of 8 children. His siblings were born in California. Because there were laws prohibiting him from owning land, he had to put the farm in the name of his brother, Uncle John, who was a citizen. The acres of the land in Long Beach were very, very harsh, and the soil was very, very poor. There were 7 Japanese American families living along the strip of land, trying to eat a living as farmers. My father decided to buy a tractor to try to modernize the farm. My mother was skeptical and was afraid that something bad was going to happen. She was right. Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese. Things got very confusing and frightening. My parents' money in the Yokohama Specie Bank in Los Angeles was confiscated by the government. Then something called Executive Order 9066 was signed by President Franklin Roosevelt. An FBI agent came to our house and told my parents to pack and be ready to go at a certain date. My father dug a big hole and dumped everything Japanese into that hole. Books, records, clothing, and he dumped my 2 Japanese dolls. I got hysterical and I wanted to keep those dolls. And so he jumped back into the hole to retrieve. I still have these dolls today as a reminder of those traumatic days. My father received permission to go to Fresno so that he could take care of his parents, my Aunt Dorothy and my Uncle Norman. But the FBI told my father to plant crops. After all, we were at war. But my father said he had no money because the government had confiscated his money in the bank. He had no cash. But the FBI agent told him, you've got to plant the crops before you can leave. So my father went to his Japanese friends and had enough money from them to get and buy seeds and seedlings and plant some crops. It took him 10 years to repay the money to his friends. We were in the Assembly Center in Fresno, a racetrack. The smell still stayed with us today. My brother and I became ill, and my father asked permission to delay our trip on the train. We didn't know where we were going, but they said, no, you have to go on that train. And so you can imagine we were the most hated family on that train because my brother and I had measles. It was a very long ride. We ended up in Jerome, Arkansas. My father was assigned to work building bridges and other construction projects. He was a farmer, but he, along with the other Japanese, did what was assigned to them. There was another internment camp in Arkansas, war. My sister Michi was born in Jerome. Her birth certificate says the United States of America, Department of Commerce, notification of birth certificate. When I compare her birth certificate and mine, they're very, very different. When we left Fresno, my grandparents, my Aunt Dorothy, and my Uncle Norman were with us. We didn't know why, but the authorities told us that we had to leave Jerome and go to another internment camp in Gila River, Arizona, on the Native American land. Many years later, I found out that German POWs were coming to Jerome. My Uncle Norman volunteered to join the U.S. Army, much to the anger of my grandparents. He never talked about his war experiences. I suspect it's because he came home alive while his friends were all killed. My Aunt Dorothy decided not to come back to California. But when we were released from Gila, we had no home to go back to Long Beach. We ended up in Fowler, a small town 10 miles south of Fresno. A German family wanted a foreman to help with the acres of Thompson Groves. So my father found this job. School had started, and my brother and I had to go to school, but we were very frightened. This was a new experience for us. During recess, a teacher said to me and to the other classmates to hold hands, but the cute blonde girl next to me refused to do so. The teacher asked again, hold her hand, and she screamed, I am not going to hold a Jap hand. In the 8th grade, we were studying the Constitution. I told my teacher that the 3 branches of the government failed us Japanese, and that we were in internment camps during the war. He didn't believe me. He thought I was making up stories and was lying. I said I had proof. I had my camp pictures to show him the next day. He still didn't believe me. I hope when the years went by that he started to believe the story I told. In the early 1980s, I was a member of Mission College accreditation team to evaluate a college in Los Angeles called Valley College. I was running back and forth, and this guy called my name. He said, what camp were you in? I looked at him and I said, you mean internment camps during the war? He said, yeah. I said, well, I was in 2 camps, Jerome and Gila River. He said he was in Mackinac. And I looked at him and said, you don't look Japanese. He said, I'm not, I'm Mexican. His name was Ralph Lazo, a counselor at that college. And he proceeded to tell me why he ended up in camp. His best friends throughout school were his Japanese Americans buddies. And so when they left for camp, he joined them. He gave up his freedom to be with his friends. I told him, Ralph, you gotta tell your story. You gotta write it down. I kept in touch with him and kept urging him to write his story. Finally, he did. And they also did a documentary about Ralph, the only Mexican in the internment camp. You can Google his story. His picture is in the Japanese American Museum in Los Angeles. I was an active member of the West Valley JCL, and when the redress and reparation movement began, I was absolutely elated. But when I brought it up before my local chapter, there were senior members of my chapter who did not believe in the movement. They said, quit rocking the boat. We have it made now. We don't need to look back into the past. I said, but we don't want another vulnerable group of people to suffer as we did. And so I began my campaign and telling my story in many, many letters to congressmen and women, senators, and community leaders. And to their credit, many of them responded. I accompanied the San Jose internees to the commission hearing at Laney College. There were internees also from Sacramento. I was emotionally drained from hearing the stories. One internee was at lunchtime sitting next to me, and he began telling me his story. He said, I never told my story. You're the first person about my days in the internment camp. And he began sobbing very heavily. All I could do was to put my hand on his back and tell him, I understand. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan formally apologized for the internment and publicly admitted that they were not justified by security reasons. I regretted that my father and grandparents did not live to see this day. For some years, I went to various colleges to talk about the internment, particularly to multi-ethnic classes. At one time, I invited Jimmy Yamaichi to speak, since he had a different perspective of the wartime. I would like to conclude by thanking the Nihonmachi Outreach Committee for sponsoring these days of remembrance all these many years. We must never, ever forget that nothing like this happens again. Our democracy is precious, but it's also very fragile, especially nowadays. Thank you for your kindness listening to my story.
Our next remembrance is a pre-recorded interview. Satomi Susie Yasui talks about her experiences as a child in camp.
Well, my name is Satomi Susie Yasui. I go by Susie now, but that's my name. And this is my internment camp story. Dad was born in 1903. He came to America at the age of 15 when FDR had put in the order that all Japanese Americans will be incarcerated. We left, he was farming. He lost everything. So we lived in Tracy at the time, and we went to Turlock Fairgrounds. It was a fairground and racetrack, and we stayed in the horse stall for about, I believe, in 3 months or so. And we didn't go to Gila River to camp until about the end of July, I believe, because it was very hot, and then to Gila River. As a child, I was very scared, I remember, and only because of my parents and reassurance that everything would be okay, that we were able to survive. I don't know how, thinking back, I don't know how we ever survived. When I think about my camp experience and what I remember and what affected me the most was my medical care. At the time, I was taken to Shriner Hospital at the age of 4, and that was in before we went to camp. So my birthday is in April, so about March, and this I found out later, many years later, that the hospital or the doctor had told a friend of ours that took us there that if they left me in Shriner Hospital at the time, it was a simple matter that by the end of the year I would be walking, which never happened, because I was told to come to camp. That didn't never happen. So I had a cast from my waist down with both legs in a cast. And that's how I survived for many years later. But finding out what really happened, it was a birth defect. And I have talked to my chiropractor, my physical therapy people, and they all said that it was a simple matter where your socket was not fitted into your hip socket. And by taking immediate care at that age, they could have fixed it right away. But after 7 years, I was told I would never walk again. Because by then, I grew and I guess it kind of, the bones have formed differently, and there was nothing they could do to me. All they could do was just change my cast on a regular basis. Other internment camps might have good medical care, I don't know, because I did not experience that. I just wanted to share that this is the medical treatment I got. I got none, absolutely none. I had a cast put on, and yearly, I remember my cast was being changed because obviously I was growing, and it was very itchy. I remember using knitting needles to scratch under the cast, I remember being in a wagon all the time because they had to cart me, and obviously I couldn't bend, so I was laying in a wagon. And my dad, bless his heart, were working and everything else, trying to take care of me and everything. It was a hardship for them, but we had no help at all. And my dad, I don't know how he did it. He got these books for reading and math, and he taught me. I'm very grateful for my parents, and as I took care of them later, my mother and dad thanked me, for taking care of them. And I said, you took care of me all these years. And my mother and dad's response was, but I'm the parent. This is my job, was to take care of you. She says, but she said, we appreciate, whatever you do for us. So that was really nice of them to say that. I was faced with catastrophe that was not under my control. If I was given health care right away, I would have been able to walk at the age of 4 instead of at the age of 10. Unless we do something about it to keep it fresh in their mind, freedom is not free. You have to earn it, When you see the word freedom, you have the word free. It's not free. I have hope in the young people for generation to come that they're the leaders of our country, and they will make sure that this will never ever happen again.
Thank you, Susie. The elderly, sick, and very young were taken away regardless of their need for medical care, which caused unnecessary hardships. There's an epilogue to Satomi's story. After her release from Gila River Camp, she was finally able to receive treatment for her condition and took her first step at age 10. We have additional video of her on our website, sjnoc.org. She's here tonight. Please welcome Satomi Susie Yasui. We will now start our traditional candlelighting ceremony. Calling the camp names are Robin Goka, Huynh, member of San Jose Nikkei Resistors, and Sharon Lieta of San Jose Japanese American Citizens League. Tonight, we have the privilege of having former incarcerees light the candles for each camp, as well as one candle for World War II veterans. We gratefully acknowledge the ongoing support from the organizations they represent. I am pleased to introduce Tom Oshidari. He was incarcerated in Rower, Arkansas. He represents San Jose Japanese American Citizens League. Eiko Yamaichi could not be here tonight due to health reasons. Please wish Eiko a speedy recovery. Fran Ellis was incarcerated at Tule Lake, California. She was born in camp. She represents Nihonmachi Outreach Committee. Her father served in the 1399th Engineer Construction Battalion during World War II. And she will be lighting the candles for Tule Lake in Eiko's stead and for Japanese American veterans. Reiko Itamura, she was incarcerated in Poston, Arizona, on Native American land, representing Japanese American Museum of San Jose. Satomi Susie Yasui was incarcerated at Gila River, Arizona. Arlene Dameron was incarcerated at Topaz, Utah. Roy Matsuzaki was incarcerated in Jerome, Arkansas and Rower, Arkansas. He represents the Japanese American Museum of San Jose. Sumi Tanabe was incarcerated in Jerome, Arkansas and Gila River, Arizona. She represents San Jose Buddhist Church, Betsuin. Shirley Kuramoto was incarcerated at Topaz, Utah and Tule Lake, California, representing Japanese American Museum of San Jose.
Manzanar, California, 10,046.
Tule Lake, California, 18,789.
Poston, Arizona, 17,814.
Gila River, Arizona, 13,348.
Art Mountain, Wyoming, 10,767.
Amachi, Colorado, 7,318.
Jerome, Arkansas, 8,497.
Rover, Arkansas, 8,475.
Topaz, Utah, 8,130.
Minidoka, Idaho, 9,397.
For Department of Justice camps,
We light a candle to honor all the Japanese American veterans.
The Japanese American community with other communities in their support for redress and reparations. The banners being carried at the front of the two procession lines are the original banners from the Day of Remembrance in 1981. The procession will be accompanied by members of San Jose Taiko. This year's procession leaders are volunteers from the San Jose Japanese American Citizens League, Avery Wong and Halle Souza, Christine Kikido of Silicon Valley Japanese American Citizens League, and Sydney Casson for Japanese American Museum of San Jose. I would like to point out that for your walk, that on the corner of Jackson Street and 5th Street, there is a curved light post called the Nikkei lantern. Etched in the bend of the lantern is February 19th, 1942. The date Executive Order 9066 was signed. The bend represents the date when this community was changed forever. When everyone had received a candle, we will have a moment of silence to honor the incarcerates and the veterans who have passed away. Overlooked anyone, and I sincerely thank everyone who's had a part in tonight's program. We also have some important announcements and a memorial tribute to two great friends of Nihonmachi Outreach Committee. At this time, I would like to acknowledge the presence of some honored guests. Deputy Consul General of Japan in San Francisco, Hajime Jimmy Kishimori. And Margaret Abe Koga, Council Member of the City of Mountain View. In presenting Day of Remembrance, Nihonmachi Outreach Committee appreciates all the support from community groups. I would like to introduce Athar Siddiqee, President of South Bay Islamic Association, to say a few words.
Good evening, friends. As mentioned, I'm with the SBA, the South Bay Islamic Association. It's the longest running Muslim organization in the South Bay, having established our first mosque in 1980 on 3rd Street, just a few blocks from here. I'm flattered to be asked to speak here today, as I have for the past 7 or 8 days of remembrance. You know, as we heard earlier, 81 years ago today, Executive Order 9066 was passed, unfairly targeting 120,000 people of Japanese descent. Roughly 59 years later, 1.8 billion Muslims worldwide were the target of hate crimes, vandalism, discrimination, and stereotypes post 9/11. Knowing what it's like to have an entire community marginalized, the Nihonmachi Outreach Committee came to our center on September 12, 2002, because they wanted to show solidarity with us. We were sincerely touched and appreciative of their gesture, and our two respective communities have been supporting each other and strengthening our bonds ever since, as evidenced by the sign that you see in the very back corner of the auditorium. Since then, the U.S. has seen progress. Over the past few years, we have witnessed numerous other movements come to the forefront. Me Too, Black Lives Matter, the fight for the $15 minimum wage come to mind, among others. We hope that individuals highlighted by these and other movements will each receive the justice that they deserve, and that one day will no longer be necessary to shine a light on harassment of women or brutality against people of color or paying unacceptable wages, because society will know that those actions are inherently wrong. Until then, however, we must work hard to create awareness of inequities, because otherwise they will continue unabated, much as the oppression of those of Japanese descent did for far too long. It's truly an honor for me to share the stage with some true heroes that we have today, who we were introduced to earlier, all the incarcerees who were jailed for the crime of simply being the wrong ethnicity. We salute them for their sacrifice, their patience, and their continued efforts to make sure that others would not have to endure what they did. Meanwhile, the haters may continue to hate, but their numbers are decreasing and their power is fading as more and more people of conscience join hands, stand up for what is right, and support one another, just as we are all doing this evening for the NOC. Just look around at your fellow attendees, people from all walks of life, ethnicities, races, and faiths, representing the beautiful mosaic that comprises this great nation. So while enemies of justice will always be there, they cannot win, because more and more of us are coming together, and together we rise. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Hayase, and I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, and I also have the honor of drawing together some of the threads of our theme of reparatory justice. My name is Susan Hayase, and I came to the Nihonmachi Outreach Committee in 1979. I came to San Jose to participate in the redress and reparations movement. This movement was both inspiring and healing to me, and it set me on a life's journey. NOC was one of the founding members of the NCRR, the National Coalition for Redress Reparations, in 1980, and The Day of Remembrance commemorations that we've been observing for so many years was an invention of the redress reparations movement to mobilize the San Jose area Japanese American community. I want to remind us that one of the principles of unity of the National Coalition for Redress Reparations was to support the struggles of other people against oppression and for justice and equality. And I know from the Remembrance speakers' presentations and from the response of this community of people that this sentiment is very strong amongst us. It's also very deeply satisfying to notice that our redress and reparations movement constitutes a precedent that shows the possibility of winning reparations. In 2018, I co-founded a multi-generational grassroots community organization called the San Jose Nikkei Resistors. We formed to unite and mobilize the Japanese American community in San Jose and Santa Clara counties against Trump's racist, anti-immigrant, and anti-Muslim policies. So, because I want to end white supremacy, the struggle to preserve and defend the history and the character of San Jose, Japantown is deeply important to me. I want to protect San Jose, Japantowns as a place in which an inclusive Japanese American community can heal from expulsion, loss of community and forced assimilation, and so it can thrive for future generations. This strong desire leads me to have deep respect for the struggles of California indigenous peoples like the Amah Mutsun tribal band and to support their work. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce our Day of Remembrance keynote speaker, Ms. Veronica Martinez, who has graciously offered to stand in for Chairperson Lopez. Veronica Martinez is of Mexican descent and an enrolled member of the Amah Mutsun tribe. She has worked for the tribe in various capacities, including working on the Amah Mutsun Speaker Series. She has received her MA in Speech Communication from California State University at Hayward. Currently, she is a tenured instructor at Chabot College in Hayward, teaching classes such as public speaking, interpersonal communications, and intercultural communication. In addition to teaching, she coordinates the Indigenous Peoples Education Association, as well as the Communications Lab, and is a representative on the Chabot College Faculty Senate. Please welcome Veronica Martinez.
Let me start with a thank you. I am absolutely honored to be here. Our tribe is honored that you recognize and invite us to such a powerful and important night. I am one representative of the Amah Mutsun tribal band, and again, we want to start with a heartfelt thank you. We appreciate this night, and I'm feeling a bit emotional. It's just so meaningful and important, and I just want to thank you for the invitation. So, I also want to note, I have to make sure what slide I'm on, thank you for the help. I also want to note that the Amah Mutsun tribe recognizes that right now I am a guest on Muwekma land. And we are neighbors to the Muwekma tribe. As you can see, our tribal territory for the Amah Mutsun are Gilroy, Watsonville, that area. So right now I'm a guest on Muwekma land. So I wanted to acknowledge that. In terms of the theme, I feel, again, honored to be here on a night that we're talking about Together We Rise. And I sort of modified my presentation a bit to fit that. I want to talk about the obstacles that those indigenous to California face, and also how we can rise together to overcome those obstacles. So that's what I'll be going through tonight. But before that, I would like to switch the slide. I would like to thank my ancestors before I discuss the obstacles and potential collaboration. This is my great-great-grandmother, Ascension Solorzano Cervantes, and she was a healer in our tribe. And I want to thank her in this moment. There is a story of J.P. Harrington coming to visit my great-great-grandmother. And when she opened the door, they say that she said, "I've been waiting for you." And he came from the Smithsonian to document as much of the language as he could. And today we appreciate that so much because we recognize what could have been lost. And now we use that same history and language to relearn our own traditions. So it's been extremely important, the work that he did. And he did this work in collaboration with my grandmother. My grandmother is Martha Herrera Orozco, and she took notes for him. So her handwriting is there with his work in the Smithsonian. And again, we value and cherish all of this documentation that was done. By the way, Martha's daughter is here, my mom, Marion. All of my ancestors, all of my family for enabling me to be here at this moment. And that brings me to the focus, which are the first to start with the obstacles. In terms of the obstacles, reminded as I was writing this and as I'm listening tonight, that we might have a different history, but we have similar obstacles. And I think that's why it was very emotional for me tonight to listen and to share in your experience and your day of remembrance because of that shared feeling. There was a lot that, I think, and unfortunately there's a lot we can relate to, and that's the unfortunate part are the obstacles and challenges. Our story starts, in terms of obstacles, starts with the mission system and the genocide that occurred in the mission system. And from that, a feeling of survival, just being in survival mode. We're not talking about thriving or growing, we're talking about just trying to survive. Throughout several periods, including the European mission system, we lost 90% of our population. So again, we're talking about survival mode. And when that happens, oftentimes people will look to other identities to try to pass. And that followed down through even to my generation. I'll tell you one brief story. When I was, I'm told that when I was about 5 or 6, I went to my aunt, who was taking care of me at the time, my tia, and we saw, do you remember those Native American, well, they were cigar store Indians is what they call them, right? The wooden sort of, yes, I see a lot of you nodding. And I guess we were passing them on our walk through the neighborhood. We passed one. And she said that I tugged at her sweater and I asked her to come down to my level and to tell her a secret. And she said that I said, "Don't tell anyone, but I'm Indian." Now, when she told me that story, I cried. She told me years later. But I cried because I had no memory of that shame, but to think that that young girl was so embarrassed that I didn't claim that identity. And I'm so grateful, again, to all my family and ancestors, because she told me that in that moment. She said, "Mija, be proud of everything you are." And that was so important, because I don't remember the shame that I expressed to her. So it was so important, her response to me in that moment. And so that's, when we talk about the mission system and we talk about genocide of that time, we're not talking about something that's encompassed in a bubble that's simply historic. It goes down through generations. Right? So at the time, my generation and prior, we were claiming other identities. I am Mexican American, very proud to be Mexican American, but I wasn't claiming the other part of who I was for quite a while. Again, because we had generations of not wanting to acknowledge it in order to survive, right? Also on the list, we have things like being moved out of our traditional land, starting with being moved to Mission San Juan Bautista. The picture that you saw of my great-great-grandmother, her marker is behind Mission San Juan Bautista. And so she is buried there, somewhere there. And so that was already a removal from our traditional land. And then through gentrification and all of these other things over time, all the rest of our tribe is also moved out of our land. Again, another outcome of that original genocide. Then you have, and I'm guessing we're feeling similarities here again in our outcomes, of the truth not being told in our education system. There are sometimes lessons, but they aren't necessarily the truth. A lot of us, for example, may have had that 4th grade project of the mission where you built the structure and were never told what happened inside, right? And luckily that is slowly changing, but it's slow. I mean, we're here in 2023 and it's just now slowly changing, right? And we're still struggling with what to replace that project with. Not our tribe, we know the truth, but we're struggling to get that truth into education. So you have no truth being told in education, and on top of that, then people rely on stereotypes, right? Whatever the media projects. And for us, it was often negative. The very few representations we did have were often negative. So no truth in the school, and then very few, if any, representation outside of that, and often negative, even in my generation. And then we have the constant messages of, you just don't matter. And that continues to this day. We had, first of all, our federal recognition removed. So we were federally recognized at one time, and then through poor census taking in the early 1920s, is that correct, I think? Yeah, I have to look to my mom. Poor census at the time, they did not count us anymore. So according to the federal government, we do not exist. But we do exist, and that is extremely important. And it's not just the Amah Mutsun. Many California tribes have this experience. There are hundreds of California tribes that are trying to regain federal recognition. That is a significant message telling us we don't matter. So no wonder that when people refer to us, they talk about us in past tense. Because if anything, they see us in a history book, but don't realize that we're still here. As mentioned, I teach at Shugo College, and we have events there. And one time a student said, I really want to meet a Native American. And I reached out my hand to shake her hand. She didn't realize she was standing next to one. But we are here. We still are here. Let's switch slides. Chairman Lopez wanted me to emphasize a couple of things. Let's see if I can read this. European colonizers wanted to dominate and destroy indigenous people, culture, spirituality, and environments, and it continues to this day. We now recognize historic trauma, and all of that comes with it, right? And we see it playing out today. For example, when people allow destruction of cultural and sacred sites, when they refuse to return ancestral remains to the tribes, and like I said, when they don't tell the truth. So indigenous tribes need to heal, and institutions responsible need to heal, and that starts by telling the truth. And the final slide. So what can we do? How can we rise together? First of all is the recognition, and that's why I'm so grateful, our tribe is so grateful for inviting us, because you see us. Not just our history, but you see the tribe today. Asking questions finding more information, sharing the videos that I love that you posted on your site, not only for myself, but of our Amah Mutsun tribe, and then recognizing the Muwekma tribe as you started today. That's huge for us because we've been ignored and silenced. And then collaborations like this and more. I hope this relationship continues. I would love to keep this conversation going. And then standing with us. For example, we have mentioned quite a bit the land in Herstock, which was our ceremonial land, hundreds of miles of land that now they want to just mine for gravel. That's just one huge, desecration of ceremonial land. These things are happening to us too often. And so we ask you to stand with us. And so if you need more information, because time is limited, you can check out amahmutsun.org for more information on Herstock and other things that are going on in our tribe. I mentioned briefly the obstacles, but I want to say we also do amazing things for community, for land, for education. So check out all the good stuff and the stuff we have to work on. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much for recognizing the Amah Mutsun people. Again, I appreciate and I'm honored to be here. Finally, I want to say to the front row that I see you. I see your pain. I see your history, and I see your resilience. And I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Reparative justice starts with acknowledging the past and seeking the truth. We can educate ourselves where the educational system left us with questions. Also the names. Names are important, and I correct myself. It's Herstock. Thank you. We in San Jose are lucky to have one of the premier Japanese American cultural groups hail from our hometown. San Jose Taiko has been partnering with Nihonmachi Outreach Committee since its beginnings, when members belong to both groups. While the stage is being set up, celebrating 50 years of artistry and community, please welcome San Jose Taiko.
Hello, my name is Yuzu Kubota, and I am a performing member of San Jose Taiko since 2016. At a young age, I learned to seek comfort in places that gave me a sense of belonging. Born and raised in the Bay Area as a Shin-Nisei, I belonged at home and at Japanese school, where we immersed ourselves in Japanese language and culture. My friends and I shared the same questions about our cultural identities, fluctuating like the thermostat dial. Are we Japanese or American? At times, Japanese-American, or none of the above. Then I met San Jose Taiko, a place where all of those readings seemed to collide. Taiko, the Japanese drum, being used to play rhythms inspired by American jazz and hip-hop. A combination that creates a unique Japanese-American voice to tell stories of incarceration, isolation, and reparation. San Jose Taiko and the San Jose Japantown community have provided me a safe space to connect with people who are different from me, to stop seeking comfort in the familiar, because that does not always come hand in hand with belonging. They taught me that cultural identities can be a spectrum, and that it's not necessary to be a perfect puzzle piece that fits into the social construct that is race. But when I look at this country, I realize that this belonging is a privilege, because so many people in this country are isolated, forced to live as victims of implicit bias and systemic racism. So when I put on this hockey coat and present myself as San Jose Taiko, I am not just a taiko player, a performer, an entertainer. I represent the struggles of the past generations who created the land, the communities, the opportunities, this life to which I am able to live today. I am the voices of the oppressed that call to rise up and break barriers for equality and inclusion. Resistance in the form of joy, because joy outpowers hate. And joy is what brings the people together. And together, we create a community of belonging. Thank you to San Jose Nihonmachi Outreach Committee for hosting this event every year, and for allowing us the opportunity to directly express what it means to be a part of this community. I am proud to call this community my home. To honor this special day and to commemorate the brave Japanese-American internees, please welcome San Jose Taiko performing DOR, composed by Franco Imperial. The next piece we'll be performing is an excerpt of Chikara, composed by San Jose Taiko alumni Janet Koike, to honor the spirit of those like her grandfather who were incarcerated at Heart Mountain. The poetry we'll be reciting was found among Janet's grandfather's belongings after he passed away. He was part of a poetry group called Tachibana Ginsha, which means Standing Flower Poetry Group. Out of the numerous poems San Jose Taiko performing members have chosen the ones that speak to them. Thank you to Janet Koike for her guidance and blessing to share this with you all tonight.
So,
I'd like to share a personal story with you to explain why events like Day of Remembrance mean so much to me. Growing up, the concept of Japanese people, of people who look like me as a minority, never once crossed my mind. I was born and raised in Maui, Hawaii. I had what I would come to learn, a simple and easy life. Hawaii is the closest representation of the utopia that America claims to be, a place where immigrants of all colors can safely call home. I look back now and can see so clearly the privilege I grew up in, a privilege which afforded me a deep pride in being both Japanese and American. I grew up playing Taiko. Every Sunday, I would go to Taiko practice, then I would go home and watch American cartoons on television. I went through the American public school system, and then I went to Japanese school after that, where I attempted to, but never truly learned how to speak Japanese. Maybe some of you here can relate to that. In Hawaii, we all knew we were Americans. So when someone asked what you were, you simply said Japanese, Filipino, or whatever you were. I was never questioned like some of you here. Yeah, but where are you really from? A simple question that could make anyone feel like they didn't belong. The incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II is the embodiment of ignorance and hatred of the other. As someone who has come to learn that I am the other, especially over these past few years, I have become more confused, angry, and sad. However, as someone who grew up never knowing I was a minority, never being made to feel that I was lesser, my position of privilege has given me an unbreaking sense of pride in who I am, a Japanese American. I play Taiko to loudly and proudly represent my identity as both a Japanese and an American. I want to live in a world where everyone is as proud as I am and who they are, where it is not a privilege but the norm to have an immense sense of pride in oneself. I have hoped that one day the sounds of the Taiko will ring loudly and proudly over the sounds of ignorance and hatred. And together, with joy, kindness, education, and patience, we will win. We'd like to end our set this evening with a piece that brings us a lot of joy to perform. The final piece we'd like to share this evening is called Gendai ni Ikiru, which means living in the present. Have a wonderful evening, and on behalf of San Jose Taiko, thank you for coming to this year's Day of Remembrance.
like to call on Reverend John Oda of Wesley United Methodist Church to give the benediction, after which I will formally conclude the program.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Oda. I'm the pastor of Wesley United Methodist Church, about a block away from here. It is an honor to be here. These Day of Remembrance events are always so meaningful to me and my family. My mother was illegally incarcerated at Heart Mountain. My father was at Poston 3. My uncle, Toll, who I never met, was killed in Brières, France, part of the 442nd 100th Battalion, trying to save the lost battalion. I'm going to ask you to please rise together, if you are able, to receive this benediction. Benediction simply means blessing, so this is a blessing to you all. May the blessed sun bring you energy every day, bringing light into the dark places of your heart. May the moon softly bathe you in the glow of a restful sleep and peaceful dreams. May the sacred rain wash away your worries and cleanse you of the grief that sits in your heart. May the Spirit's gentle breeze blow new strength into your being. And may you believe in the courage you hold. And may you walk with resilience in this world, bringing justice to all the places that sorely need it. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Oda. We have come to the end of this evening's program. We have heard first-hand experiences of survivors of the camps as children and the far-reaching consequences of incarceration. We have seen former incarcerated give witness to their imprisonment through the candlelight ceremony and the candlelight procession through Japantown. We give support to the Amah Mutsun tribal band in their struggles for reparative justice. We would like to thank all of the speakers and performers and to all the volunteers and you, the audience, who made this program possible. Without community support, Day of Remembrance would not happen. We would greatly appreciate any donation you may leave with us to help us continue offering Day of Remembrance programs. If you believe that the Day of Remembrance programs should continue, in fact must continue, please be generous with your support. On behalf of the Nihonmachi Outreach Committee, thank you for attending the 43rd Annual Day of Remembrance. We hope that the program stirs some memories, led you to share your thoughts with your family, and perhaps inspired you to take some action. Remember that each and every one of us can do our part for reparative justice. Thank you.